Now to an update on a story from earlier this week by the Australian's media writer Sophie Ellsworth. It concerns this now deleted tweet sent in December by ABC presenter Phillip Adams. During an exchange between himself and singer Kamahl over the late Don Bradman, Adams did something gobsmackingly stupid, implying that Bradman was a racist. He said that the friendship between Kamahl and the late cricketer was only possible because Bradman regarded him as an honorary white. Well, last week at Senate Estimates, ABC Managing Director David Anderson was asked about Adams' behaviour, and this was his response.
And then when Kamahl came to the defence of Phillip Adams, he came to the defence of Don Bradman, he labelled him an honorary white in the eyes of Donald Bradman. Have you reviewed those tweets of an ABC employee and their effect in the world?
Senator, yes, we have. That was certainly unfortunate. My understanding is Mr Adams has written to Kamahl apologising for that.
Privately?
Privately, written to him apologising for that. And look, yes, we have investigated.
Well, as The Australian reported, that was highly contentious. Last week, Kamahl wrote to Anderson saying that what he claimed at Estimates was news to him. Mr Anderson, let me clarify. The only action that Adams has taken to date in dealing with this issue is to block me on Twitter and double down on his initial slur in which he referred to me as an honorary white. I've received absolutely nothing by way of apology from Adams, nor his employer, the ABC. Anderson subsequently contacted Kamahl, and last Friday, Adams sent a private apology by email he claimed was posted 2 weeks prior. It pains me deeply that you believe I've been both unkind and cruel to you. This stems from a misunderstanding about that tweet, intended as a rebuke to Bradman, not you. I regret that my words have been misunderstood and that they have caused you unhappiness. Now, understandably, Kamahl doesn't regard that as a private apology, particularly because it was not delivered publicly. Now, that's ongoing, and we'll revisit that down the track, but this issue raises another issue, and that is the inaccurate information Managing Director David Anderson provided to Estimates last week. In light of that, Senator Ross Cadell, who you saw earlier, has formally requested that Anderson explain himself to the committee. We'll update you when we know more. But all of this reflects poorly on the ABC's editor-in-chief. If he cannot be bothered to be across his brief at Senate Estimates, he is clearly not up to the job. Joe, keen to hear your thoughts. Obviously, it's a complicated issue, right? But that aside, the whole issue of Senate Estimates not getting the entirely full picture, it's concerning, right?
It is very concerning. I don't think David Anderson deliberately misled Senate Estimates, though. He would know that the seriousness of that, and of course, he would know that if he was deliberately misleading, if he knew the truth was something else, that clearly that is not going to stay secret for very long.
Someone's misinformed.
Someone is misinforming.
And are there going to be consequences for taxpayers being misinformed?
I think I actually covered this. I wrote a column about this very issue. I spoke to Kamahl. I think I was the first person that Kamahl spoke to publicly afterwards when I was guest hosting 2GB. The tweet was absolutely appalling.
Terrible.
Adams' apology saying, I'm so sorry you believe it was this, as though he's too stupid to know the sophistication of the incredibly witty reference that Adams was making, which I'll come to in 1 second. That is, in fact, doubly insulting. It's the classic thing, I'm sorry you're offended, or I'm sorry you think that I did this. But be that as it may, I mean, did he actually write to him physically? Did Phillip Adams have Kamahl's address this whole time? Are they friends? How did he know who to write to? I mean, this raises more questions than it answers. Why was it? I mean, the slur was public, therefore the apology should have been public. But getting to this thing, I'm so sorry you didn't realise because I'm such an anti-racist. I've been covering apartheid in South Africa. And because he did, because publicly he was doubling down and saying, well, I won a Human Rights Award once, so I can't possibly be racist.
And didn't he mention something about like his sister-in-law being Indigenous, or I don't know, there was some...
I think his wife is actually Indigenous, so
yeah, that's
that. But again, does that mean you can say whatever you want? But the honorary white thing, the honorary white apartheid is a term, an official category the South African government gave to collaborators of apartheid. So even if it was taken in the way in which Phillip Adams said, he is basically accusing Kamahl of being an Uncle Tom or someone who is prepared to cooperate with a racist regime. It's actually the worst thing you can say. So he's... so in his pomposity, he's made it worse for himself.
Michelle, to your earlier point, it's time and time again, the conduct of these ABC presenters and reporters on social media coming into the public light. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, Senate estimates, I feel like the ABC spends a lot of time at Senate estimates apologising for things that their broadcasters are saying. So I think that there's a real issue here. Maybe they need to get off the social media, as I made the point earlier. I know that working for, in commercial radio, in a commercial media organisation, we are held to pretty strict accounts. There have been times that I've tweeted stuff and I've been told to get off Twitter, and I have. But, I just don't see that here. I just don't see the repercussions. Time and time again, the taxpayers are footing the bill. I mean, we saw it with, Louise Milligan. Like, we're footing the bill for a lot of this, for a lot of the mistakes that they're making, that they're putting out there. And I'm just not seeing any repercussions for any of them.
And it's not about left or right. It's about the fact that they're factual mistakes that are costing money and the policies don't seem to be in place. But I want to go to one more story, move on quickly. I want us to have a quick look at how the US media is covering Joe Biden in Ukraine.
To find a day of this kind of presidential bravery in a war zone, you've got to go all the way back to 1864, July, when Abraham Lincoln, as president, went to see Confederate soldiers who were firing on Washington, D.C. That's what presidential bravery in wartime is.
Joe Biden, Abraham Lincoln.
Well, if Joe Biden gets a medal, Sean Penn could get two, because he's in and out of there like it's like his daily commute. My mate Misha was over there. He was doing selfies with Sean Penn, and he should get a medal for every column he wrote for the Fin Review about it.
I mean, comparing Biden to Abraham Lincoln, I mean, if Abraham Lincoln was still alive, they'd be the same age. So I think that kind of works anyway.
Michelle, something else interesting as well is Donald Trump took that opportunity to go to Ohio. Obviously, there was that train incident there. And he painted it as in, you've got a president on President's Day who can't even be bothered to be in your country.
Yeah, I think
Do you think that's a working strategy?
Well, I think that's actually a very valid point, because what's happening in Ohio is undervalued by what's going on in the Democratic Party at its upper echelon. Because the Ohio train tragedy is just, I don't know if anyone's been looking into it. It's just incredibly terrible stuff. So, look, I don't begrudge Biden for going over to Ukraine. I get it. It was like a year since, the shelling started. And I think that it's very important that he shows his face, particularly the NATO countries. And, it was just on the eve of Putin making his warmongering speech. And I think there's a lot of discussion about Washington and, Putin pulling out of the alliance with all the nuclear arms. So, look, he has to be there, and I get that. But there are other things that I think he should be doing as well. Focusing in his own backyard would be a good start. And
also, just in Joe Biden's defence, it is quite possible he thought he was in Ohio.
I do like to. You don't have to hold that long for applause. It's not. I love how you just sit there. But I do like how they called it Rail Force One when he was on the train to get to Ukraine. It was Rail Force One.
Thank you so much, Joe Hildebrand, Michelle Stevenson. Thank you so much for joining me.